Wake up to barista-quality coffee with the Brewmaster Coffee Maker. With a single touch, brew the perfect cup every morning, customized to your taste. Sleek, easy to use, and designed to make every day a little better. Order now to transform your mornings. The extraction route through the Cytherian prison ship was a nightmare of collapsed corridors, emergency bulkheads, and desperate alien guards trying to maintain control of their deteriorating situation. Sarah moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times before, while Vorthak followed with surprising stealth for a creature of his size. "Extract team to command," the team leader reported through his tactical communicator. "Package secured, plus one large passenger. Proceeding to Extraction Point Alpha." "Negative on Extraction Point Alpha," came the immediate response. "Cytherians have sealed that section. Reroute to Point Charlie. You have 12 minutes before the support fleet has to withdraw." Sarah checked her wrist scanner and frowned. Charlie is on the other side of the ship, through the main armory and the command center. "That's not an extraction route, that's a suicide mission?" The second soldier, who had introduced himself as Corporal Martinez, gestured toward a maintenance shaft. "Unless we go through the infrastructure tunnels. Faster route, but we'll be traveling blind through enemy territory." "I know a better way," Vorthak said quietly. All four humans turned to look at him. "I have been studying this ship for 3 years. I know passages that even the Cytherians have forgotten about." The team leader, Sergeant Brooks, was clearly uncomfortable with trusting their escape to an alien prisoner. "Dr. Chun, respectfully, how do we know this isn't a trap?" Sarah looked at Vorthak, then back at her rescuers. "Because if he wanted to betray us, all he had to do was nothing. He could have let me rot in that cell, or killed me like he did the other prisoners. Instead, he's risking his own life to help us escape." Another explosion shook the ship, this one close enough to crack the walls around them. Emergency klaxons blared as atmosphere began leaking through damaged bulkheads. "Vorthak," Sarah said, "where's your route?" The dragon moved to what looked like a solid section of wall and pressed his claw against a nearly invisible seam. A hidden panel slid aside, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel that angled upward through the ship's superstructure. "This leads to the old command observation deck," Vorthak explained. "It was sealed off when the Cytherians upgraded their systems, but it connects to the main hangar bay through the original ventilation network." Sergeant Brooks studied the tunnel entrance. "It's pretty narrow. Will you fit?" Vorthak's chuckle was grim. "I will fit. The question is whether you humans can keep up." They entered the tunnel in single file, with Vorthak leading the way, despite his bulk. Sarah followed immediately behind him, then Corporal Martinez, with Sergeant Brooks bringing up the rear. The tunnel was dark and cramped, filled with the sounds of the ship's dying systems and the distant chaos of combat. As they crawled through the narrow space, Sarah kept one hand on Vorthak's back, partly for guidance and partly to monitor his condition. She could feel the tension in his muscles and the way his breathing had become more labored. "Vorthak," she whispered, "how's your wing?" "Better than it has been in months, thanks to you," he replied quietly. Though crawling through maintenance tunnels was not part of my rehabilitation plan. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. "I'll make a note to update your treatment protocol." Behind them, Corporal Martinez was speaking into his communicator. "Command, we're proceeding through alternative route. Ada to Extraction Point Charlie is 8 minutes. Roger that, extract team. Be advised, Cytherian reinforcements are inbound to your sector. Move fast." The tunnel began to slope upward more steeply, and Vorthak paused at a junction where several passages met. He studied the options for a moment, his golden eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. "This way," he said, choosing the passage that led to the right. 2 more minutes and we'll be at the observation deck." As they continued, Sergeant Brooks moved up beside Sarah. "Dr. Chun, I need to ask you something. Command wants to know what your plans are for the prisoner once we reach the extraction ship." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "That depends on what Vorthak wants to do." "Sarah," Vorthak said without turning around, "I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About having better options than revenge. And I want to know what those options are." But first, I want to help you do something about this ship. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? Vorthek stopped crawling and turned to face her in the narrow tunnel. This ship contains over 3,000 prisoners from dozens of different species. Most of them are political prisoners, captured civilians, or prisoners of war like myself. If we escape and leave them here, the Catherians will execute them all in retaliation. The weight of his words settled over the group. Sergeant Brooks spoke into his communicator. Command, we need immediate guidance. The prisoner is reporting 3,000 additional captives on this ship. The response came back immediately. Extract team, your orders are to retrieve Dr. Chun only. You are not authorized for a general prisoner rescue mission. Sarah's voice was firm. Then change the authorization. Dr. Chun, Sergeant Brooks said carefully, we don't have the resources for that kind of operation. Our ship can maybe handle 20 additional passengers, maybe. Then we make multiple trips, Sarah said. Or we find another way. Vorthek was studying her face in the dim light. Sarah, you cannot save everyone. Sometimes the most good you can do is save yourself and live to fight another day. Is that what you're going to do? Sarah asked. Live to fight another day? The dragon considered this. I think perhaps I have had enough fighting for several lifetimes. But I also cannot ignore 3,000 innocent prisoners. Corporal Martinez checked his chronometer. Sir, we have 5 minutes to extraction. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. Sarah looked at each of them in turn. Vorthek, you know this ship better than anyone. Is there a way to disable the prisoner containment system from the observation deck? Yes, Vorthek said slowly. The old observation deck has manual overrides for all ship systems. It was designed to allow the captain to maintain control, even if the main command center was compromised. And if we disable the containment system, every prisoner on this ship will be free to escape. But Sarah, they will have nowhere to go. Most of the escape pods were damaged in the initial attack. Sergeant Brooks was shaking his head. Dr. Chun, this is getting way beyond our mission parameters. Sarah looked at him steadily. Sergeant, what's the motto of the 47th Special Operations Medical Corps? No one left behind, Brooks replied automatically. That's right. No one left behind. Not just humans, everyone. Sarah turned back to Vorthek. Can you override the containment system? I can, but it will trigger every alarm on the ship and bring every remaining guard to our location. Corporal Martinez was monitoring his communicator. Command is ordering immediate extraction. The support fleet is taking heavy fire and needs to withdraw. Sarah made her decision. Vorthek, we're going to free those prisoners. Sergeant, you and Martinez get to the extraction point and tell the fleet to wait. We're not leaving you, Brooks said firmly. You're not leaving me. You're following orders. I'm ordering you to secure the extraction point while Vorthek and I handle the containment system. Vorthek studied her face. Sarah, if we do this, we may not make it to extraction. The Catherians will throw everything they have at us. Then we better work fast. Sarah checked her remaining equipment. She still had 2 molecular disruptors and something that looked like a medical scanner, but was probably a portable computer system. How long will it take you to override the containment system? 3 minutes if I can access the manual controls without interference. Then let's give those 3,000 prisoners a chance to save themselves. They reached the observation deck access panel, and Vorthek carefully opened it. The chamber beyond was larger than the tunnels, with a curved wall of reinforced transparasteel that looked out over the ship's main hangar bay. Ancient control panels lined the walls. Their displays dark but still functional. Vorthek moved immediately to the central control station and began working at a speed that suggested he had been planning this for a long time. Sarah positioned herself at the chamber's entrance, her remaining equipment ready. Sergeant Brooks, Sarah said into her communicator, are you and Martinez in position? Affirmative. But Dr. Chun, command is reporting massive Catherian reinforcements heading for your sector. You have maybe 2 minutes before they reach you? Sarah watched Vorthek work at the controls, his claws moving with surprising delicacy across the alien interface. "How much time do you need?" "Almost there," Vorthek replied. 60 more seconds. The first alarm began sounding as the ship's security systems detected unauthorized access to the containment controls. Sarah could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and shouted orders as Cytherian guards rushed toward their location. "Sarah," Vorthek said urgently, "the manual override requires 2 simultaneous inputs. I need you to activate the secondary control station while I handle the primary." Sarah moved to the indicated control panel and found herself looking at a complex array of alien symbols and indicators. "What am I looking for?" "The red S." The alarm that suddenly screamed through the ship's corridors was unlike anything Vorthek had heard in his 3 years of captivity. It wasn't the standard prisoner alert or the maintenance warning. This was the ship's emergency battle station's alarm, the kind reserved for full-scale attacks or catastrophic system failures. Sarah remained perfectly calm, her ear still pressed to the cell door. She was counting something under her breath, her lips moving silently as she tracked the sounds of chaos erupting throughout the ship. "Dr. Chun," Vorthek said carefully, "what exactly is happening out there?" Sarah turned from the door with a satisfied expression. 17 minutes and 32 seconds. Not bad, considering they had to break through 3 layers of Cytherian military encryption first. The dragon's golden eyes narrowed. "Breakthrough encryption? Who is they?" Before Sarah could answer, the ship shuddered violently, throwing both of them against the walls of their cell. The lights flickered again, and somewhere in the distance they could hear the distinctive sound of plasma weapons firing. "My unit?" Sarah said simply, as if that explained everything. "The 47th Special Operations Medical Corps, though I suppose they're not technically a medical unit anymore." Vorthek stared at her. "Special Operations? You said you were a combat medic?" I am." Sarah began examining the cell door's locking mechanism with the focused attention of someone who had studied such devices before. "But the 47th isn't just any medical unit. We're specialists in extraction operations, deep reconnaissance, and what the military calls humanitarian intervention in hostile territory." Another explosion rocked the ship, this one close enough to make their ears ring. Through the cell's ventilation system, they could smell smoke and hear the shouting of Cytherian guards trying to coordinate their defense. "Let me understand this correctly," Vorthek said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "You're telling me that you're not just a doctor who happened to get captured. You're some kind of special forces operative whose unit is currently attacking this ship to rescue you." Sarah looked up from her examination of the door. "Well, when you put it like that, it does sound a bit dramatic. But essentially, yes." The dragon began to laugh, a sound like distant thunder that echoed through the cell. The Cytherians thought they were throwing a helpless human healer to the monster. Instead, they gave the monster a highly trained special operations soldier who comes with her own rescue team. "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement," Sarah said. "I'd treat your wing injury, you help me get out of here when my team arrives." Another massive explosion shook the ship, and this time the lights went out completely. Emergency illumination flickered on a moment later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. "Dr. Chun," Vorthek said seriously, "I need to tell you something. This cell isn't just locked from the outside. The locking mechanism has internal sensors that will trigger a lethal gas system if it detects any attempt at escape from within." Sarah paused in her examination of the door. "Gas system?" "Neurotoxin. Designed to kill anything in the cell within 30 seconds. The Cytherians built it specifically for me, but it will work just as effectively on humans." Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking, "What triggers the sensors?" "Any attempt to damage the door or walls. Any significant electromagnetic signature that suggests hacking equipment. Any sudden temperature change that might indicate plasma cutting tools." "Interesting." Sarah pulled off one of her shoes and began working at the heel. After a moment, she extracted a small device no bigger than her thumbnail. "Good thing this doesn't use any of those methods." Vorthek's eyes widened. What is that? Molecular disruptor, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Standard issue for the 47th. It doesn't cut or burn or hack. It simply convinces the target material that it would rather be a gas than a solid. The dragon stared at the tiny device. You've been carrying that this entire time? Among other things. The Catherians are very thorough when they search for weapons and traditional escape tools. They're not quite as good at finding medical equipment that has been slightly modified. She attached the device to a specific point on the door's locking mechanism. This is going to take about 5 minutes. Might want to stand back. As if summoned by her words, they heard footsteps approaching their cell. Multiple sets, moving fast and heavy. The unmistakable sound of armed guards responding to an emergency. Sarah, Vorthak said urgently, if they find that device, they won't, Sarah said calmly. She pressed something on the device and it became completely transparent, invisible against the metal of the door. Optical camouflage. Another useful medical modification. The footsteps stopped right outside their cell. They could hear hushed conversation in the Catherian language, followed by the sound of the viewing slot being opened. The prisoners appear secure, one guard said in accented human standard. The dragon is in the far corner with the human. No sign of attempted escape. Sarah had positioned herself casually near the center of the cell, while Vorthak remained in the shadows where he always stayed. To the guards, everything looked completely normal. Orders are to maintain full lockdown until the attack is repelled, another guard said. No one goes in or out of the maximum security cells. The viewing slot slammed shut, and the footsteps moved on down the corridor. Sarah waited a full minute before she allowed herself to smile. 4 minutes to go, she said quietly. Vorthak studied her with new respect. Dr. Chun, exactly how many wars have you fought in? Officially? 3 major campaigns and 17 smaller conflicts. Sarah checked something on her wrist that looked like a medical scanner but was probably something else entirely. Unofficially? Let's just say that the 47th goes places that don't technically exist, and helps people who are never supposed to need help. The ship shuddered again, and this time they could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons being fired inside the ship itself. The attack had moved from external bombardment to internal assault. Your team is already on board, Vorthak observed. Of course. The bombardment was just a distraction. The real rescue team came in through the maintenance airlocks while the Catherians were focused on the obvious threat. Sarah moved back to the door and checked her device. 2 minutes. Sarah, Vorthak said carefully, when your team arrives, what happens to me? Sarah looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? I am the enemy of everyone on this ship. I am also technically the enemy of your species. Since the draconic sovereignty fought against human expansion for over a century, why would your rescue team want to help me escape? Sarah's expression became serious. Because you're not my enemy. You're a prisoner of war who's been subjected to torture and illegal detention. You're also a former military commander who probably has information that could help end this war faster and save lives on all sides. The dragon was quiet for a moment. And if I choose not to come with you? Then you stay here and continue being their pet monster until they decide you're no longer entertaining, Sarah said bluntly. Or until they kill you for sport. Your choice. Another explosion, much closer this time. Close enough to make dust rain down from the ceiling and cause several lights to go out permanently. 1 minute, Sarah announced. Dr. Chun, Vorthak said. There's something you should know about me. What's that? I'm not just any draconic commander. I'm the heir to the dragon throne. If I escape, if I make it back to what's left of my people, I could potentially restart the war between our species. Sarah looked at him steadily. And will you? I don't know, Vorthak admitted. 3 years of captivity have given me much time to think about the cost of war. But they have also given me much time to think about revenge. Then I guess we'll have to make sure you have better options than revenge. Sarah said the molecular disruptor completed its work with a sound like a whispered sigh. The massive locking mechanism simply dissolved, its component molecules deciding they would rather be somewhere else. The cell door swung slightly open. "Freedom," Sarah said quietly. "Still interested?" Vorthek looked at the open door, then at the small human woman who had somehow managed to accomplish in minutes what he had been unable to do in 3 years. "Dr. Chun, if we do this, there's no going back. The Catherians will hunt both of us to the ends of the galaxy." "They're already hunting me," Sarah pointed out. "And they've been torturing you for 3 years. I'm not sure our situation can get much worse." From somewhere deep in the ship came the sound of human voices shouting tactical commands. Sarah's rescue team was getting closer. "Besides," Sarah added, "I made you a promise about treating your wing injury properly. I can't do that if we're both stuck in this cell." Vorthak made his decision. "Very well, Dr. Chun, I place myself under your protection." "Good." Sarah moved to the cell door and listened carefully to the sounds in the corridor. "When we leave this cell, we're not doctor and patient anymore. We're allies. Can you handle that?" The dragon's laugh was genuinely amused. "I think I can manage to work with the human who treated my wounds and then broke us both out of an escape-proof cell." Sarah opened the door carefully and peered out into the corridor. The emergency lighting cast everything in blood-red shadows, and she could see that several other cell doors had been damaged by the ship's weapons fire. "Vorthek," she said quietly. Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the transport ship, feeling the vibrations of the engines through her fingertips. The Catherian guards had stripped her of her medical equipment 3 days ago, leaving her with nothing but the standard prisoner uniform that hung loose on her small frame. They thought they were punishing her for treating wounded human soldiers during the siege of Proxima Colony. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. The massive alien guard, standing nearly 9 feet tall with chitinous armor plating and 4 arms, gestured roughly toward the corridor. "Move, human scum. The warden wants to see you before your final placement." Sarah walked calmly between the 2 guards, her dark eyes taking in every detail of the ship's layout. Emergency panels, weapon storage, communication arrays. Old habits from her military training died hard, even after 15 years of practicing medicine in the outer colonies. The guards saw a small human woman who looked fragile and harmless. They saw someone who had spent her career healing instead of killing. They couldn't have been more wrong. The warden's chamber was a testament to Catherian arrogance. Massive viewing screens showed images of conquered worlds, while trophies from defeated species lined the walls. The warden himself was even larger than the guards, his 4 eyes glowing amber as he studied Sarah from behind his imposing desk. "Dr. Sarah Chun," his voice rumbled through the translation device. "Former lieutenant colonel in the human military? Current medical officer for the Proxima Colony Resistance? You have been found guilty of providing aid to enemy combatants against the Catherian Empire." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "I provided medical care to wounded people. That's what doctors do." The warden's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your defiance is noted. Most species break before they even reach my chamber. Humans are interesting in their stubborn refusal to accept reality." He stood towering over her even at a distance. "I have decided on your punishment. You will be placed in cell block 7, in the containment unit with our most dangerous prisoner, a creature so violent and unpredictable that even our bravest guards refuse to enter its cell." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And you think throwing me in there will break my spirit?" "I think it will provide entertainment for my staff," the warden said. "The last 3 prisoners we placed with the creature lasted less than an hour. You might last longer. Humans are surprisingly durable." The guards roughly grabbed Sarah's arms and dragged her toward the exit. As they walked through the corridors of the massive prison ship, other prisoners from various species watched through their cell bars. Tall, gray-skinned Velrans, insectoid Zephyrians, even a few reptilian Sarati warriors. All of them looked at Sarah with the same expression, pity for the dead woman walking. Cell block 7 was located in the deepest part of the ship, where the artificial gravity was strongest and the walls were reinforced with quantum-bonded steel. The air itself felt heavier here, oppressive and cold. As they approached the final cell, Sarah could hear something moving inside. Something large. The cell door was unlike the others they had passed. This one was nearly a foot thick, with multiple locking mechanisms and warning signs in a dozen different languages. Through the small viewing window, Sarah could see movement in the darkness beyond. Last chance to beg for mercy. Human, one of the guards said as he worked the complex unlocking sequence. Sarah looked at him calmly. I don't beg. The massive door slid open with a grinding sound that echoed through the corridor. The guards shoved Sarah inside so quickly that she stumbled and fell to her knees on the metal floor. Behind her, the door slammed shut with a finality that made the other prisoners in nearby cells whisper prayers in their native languages. Sarah slowly stood up and dusted off her knees, then looked around her new home. The cell was larger than the others, perhaps 30 feet by 30 feet, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. The walls were scarred with deep gouges, as if massive claws had raked across the metal again and again. In one corner, she could see the remnants of what might have been a previous cellmate. That's when she heard the breathing. It was deep and rhythmic, like the sound of air moving through a massive bellows. Sarah turned toward the sound and found herself looking into a pair of eyes that glowed like molten gold in the darkness. As her own eyes adjusted, she began to make out the shape of her CLLMATE. It was definitely a dragon, though unlike any she had seen in human mythology. This creature was easily 20 feet long, with scales that shifted color from deep purple to black depending on how the light hit them. Its wings were folded against its sides, but she could tell they would span the entire width of the cell when extended. Most impressive of all was its head, which was both beautiful and terrible. With intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her, the dragon studied her for a long moment. Its head tilted slightly to one side. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, speaking perfect human standard. Another sacrifice to the entertainment of our captors, the dragon said. You are smaller than the others. Perhaps you will last longer before I am forced to end your suffering. Sarah crossed her arms and looked up at the massive creature. I'm not planning to suffer, and I'm definitely not planning to die. What's your name? The dragon's eyes widened slightly, as if surprised by her calm response. I am Vorthak of the Crimson Nebula, last of the Draconic Sovereignty. And you are about to become my meal, small human. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, she replied matter-of-factly. And you're hurt. Vorthak reared back slightly. What did you say? Sarah pointed to the dragon's left wing, where she had noticed the way he held it slightly differently than the right. Your wing. The way you're favoring it suggests either a recent injury or an old one that wasn't properly treated. Also, you've been breathing slightly heavier on the left side, which indicates possible internal damage. How long have you been injured? The dragon stared at her for a full minute without speaking. No prisoner had ever noticed his injury before. No prisoner had ever asked about his condition or spoken to him as if he were anything other than a monster to be feared. 6 months, Vorthak finally admitted. The guards used neural disruptors when they captured me. The damage was ... extensive. Sarah nodded and stepped closer, ignoring the way the dragon's massive head tracked her movement. Neural disruptors cause neurological inflammation that can affect motor control and pain management. If it's been 6 months without proper treatment, the damage could be getting worse. You speak as if you know about such things, Vorthak said, his voice curious despite himself. I'm a doctor, Sarah said simply. It's what I do? May I examine your wing? Vorthak's laugh was like distant thunder. You wish to examine me? Little human, I could incinerate you where you stand. I could tear you apart with a single claw. I am the most feared creature on this ship. Sarah looked up at him with steady eyes. Yes, you could kill me easily, but you haven't, and you won't, want to know how I know. The dragon lowered his great head until it was level with hers. This close, she could feel the heat radiating from his scales and smell the metallic scent of his breath. Enlighten me, Dr. Chun. Because you're not a monster, Sarah said calmly. You're a person? An intelligent being who's been locked in this cell for months, probably years. with no one to talk to except the prisoners they throw in here to die. You're lonely, you're in pain, and you're tired of being treated like a beast." Vorthek was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, less theatrical. "The last prisoner they brought me was a Velran diplomat. He screamed for 30 minutes before his heart gave out from fear. Before that, it was a Zephyrian warrior who tried to fight me. I killed him quickly, as an act of mercy." "But you don't want to kill," Sarah observed. "You do it because it's expected. Because it's easier than letting them suffer in here with you, knowing they'll never leave." The dragon's golden eyes studied her face intently. "You are not what I expected, Dr. Sarah-chan." Sarah smiled slightly. "I get that a lot. Now about that wing injury? I can't fix it completely without proper equipment, but I might be able to help reduce the pain and improve your mobility. The question is, do you trust me enough to let me try?" Vorthok considered this. In all his years of captivity, no one had ever offered to help him. No one had ever looked at him and seen anything other than a monster. This small human female, who should have been cowering in terror, was instead offering medical assistance to the creature meant to be her executioner. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why would you help me?" "Because you're in pain," Sarah said. "And because I took an oath a long time ago to do no harm and to help anyone who needed it." That oath didn't come with a species exemption clause. The dragon slowly extended his left wing, revealing the damage that the neural disruptors had caused. Sarah could see the way the wing membrane was slightly discolored, and how some of the smaller wing bones weren't quite aligned properly. As she began her examination, neither the dragon nor the human doctor noticed the small surveillance camera in the corner of the cell, or the fact that the warden and several of his staff were watching the unprecedented interaction with growing amazement. "Fascinating," the warden murmured to his subordinates. "In 3 years, no one has.